Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be looking at the first half of my games in the Arnold Denker National Tournament of High School State Champions. So this was a 6-round tournament, so the first half would be 3 games. However, not all of the games were very exciting, so I'll only be looking at the most exciting game. In the first game, I lost to a FIDE master. He's actually an international master now from New York. And the second game, I beat a 1700 from Maine. So I'm 1 out of 2 heading into this game. I get a 2265, I'm a 2040 myself. So I'm trying to win this game to try to gain some rating. So the game starts with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. This is the Rue Lopez. And I did some prep on my opponent's chess.com, and I found a game that we played, and it was a marshal or something like that. I didn't really want to go into the marshal, so I played this line instead, where I go c3, and after d5 I take and play d4. So the point here is to get an isolated pawn, however, it's protected alright, and also the square in front of it is, I have a bishop controlling it, I can move a knight here if I want to, so it's okay for white. So we get knight a5, bishop c2, logical move, trying to aim at h7. My opponent plays c5, which is kind of interesting, and now I take and my opponent recaptures. So now if you look at this bishop, it's hanging, it's not very protected, so this actually allows me to play bishop takes h7 check, which sets up a fork like this, and I can win the bishop. So now I've won a pawn, but at what cost? Well, my opponent can now play rook c8 with tempo, and now knight c6 with tempo. My queen's getting kicked around a lot, so my opponent just got 2 free improving moves, and also my position isn't very good, because my pieces aren't developed. So my opponent plays knight b4, and when you're in the leading development, you want to make threats. So that's how you're going to use your pieces, you make threats. So my opponent's starting to play knight c2 with a fork-town USA, another fork-town with on d3, other bishop and the rook, so lots of threats here. I play knight a3, stop knight c2, but now after knight d3 I can play rook d1. Now I have this nice little pin here, and after knight f6, now the knight's pinned to the queen. However, it is protected, and it's hard for me to add another attacker, because if I play with like queen f5, trying to put pressure on the knight, there's bishop e4 defending with tempo. So instead I go to queen g5, which is a mistake because it allows my opponent to double my pawns. My opponent doesn't do that and plays knight e4 instead, and if my opponent were to double my pawns like this, he would have to follow it up with queen d7. And the idea is to target this pawn, and it looks like it makes sense, but it also looks kind of scary because it's leaving this knight here, and it's kind of hard to protect the knight. So moves like queen e3 might be a little scary, but my opponent can just play rook d8 and then stack the rook like this to protect the knight. And it turns out this knight's actually going to be pretty strong, because it's not hard for me to attack it. It's not easy for me to attack it either. But my opponent doesn't do this, and instead plays knight e4, attacking the queen. Now I go queen h5, which is not a good move. It's actually a blunder. So what I have to do here is trade queens and play bishop e3, but I'm losing this pawn here, and with my bad pieces, it just doesn't look very good. So I chose not to do this, but instead, after this, my opponent has a lot of good moves. So one of them is to just play b4, taking advantage of this knight on the side here, and it can't go here, here, or here, and if it goes back, then I hang this bishop. So this would have just basically won a piece, but my opponent didn't see this for some reason. He was kind of low on time, he didn't want to spend too much time, so he played the move rook c5, a natural move attacking the queen relatively quickly. So I run to h4, my opponent trades queens. It's not the best idea to trade queens because he does have the initiative and he's down material, he's down a pawn, but my opponent was low on time, so he's trying to simplify the position. And now my opponent doesn't take this pawn because he was probably scared of this pin, this fork I mean, so my opponent plays rook d8 to protect the knight instead. Now I'll play bishop e3, attacking the rook and defending this pawn, and now I am up a pawn, but my opponent still has good pieces. So rook d5, and after rook d5 I play f3, and the idea behind f3 is after knight f6 to play rook d2 to try to stack. And I saw that f3 kind of traps the knight over here, but I saw that after rook h5, I had rook d1, and I've pressure on this knight, and if takes, and takes. Now I've traded a lot of pieces, and I should just be up a clean pawn, and it should be really good for me. But what I missed was that my opponent doesn't have to attack the knight with the rook. He can just play g5, and now my knight's trapped. So I have to sacrifice my exchange. So that's really a setback. Now I'm down material basically because I can't really use my extra pawns. So it's pretty bad. My opponent trades rooks, good move. And now my opponent starts going after my pawns after he moves his knight to safety. So I know I'm going to lose one of these pawns, so I basically have a choice here, which pawn do I want to lose? Well, I saw that if I put my knight on d4 and a pawn on b3, I can at least save the b pawn momentarily. So that's what I end up doing. And another note, at this point, we basically both don't have a lot of time left. We have like a minute each at most, and also the time control is 90 plus 30. So there's no extra time control, no extra time after move 40. So for the rest of the game, we're going to be in time trouble. So how do I feel about this? Well, when I looked at my opponent's chess.com account, I saw that his blitz rating was 2300, and I'm about 200 points higher than him. So I am down exchange here, but I thought I had pretty good chances to draw the game if I play well. Now, of course, 2300 is very good, and my opponent probably should win this game if he plays at his best, but anything can happen in a time scramble, so let's just see what happens. And the fact that I'm showing this game probably shows that something exciting happens. So I play knight to f5, knight out of f5 is worth at least a queen, but not in this case. Bishop c8, knight d6, bishop e6, h4, we're just making moves here. Trying to push my pawns, try to create something. Rook a1, f4, I'm just pushing pawns. We're also not going to play all the best moves. Bishop d2, rook d1, knight f3 to protect the bishop. Now knight e7, h6 check, so now I'm trying to do something with my h-pawn. And king h7 allows knight e4 to attack the pawn, and after knight g6, knight g8, now I had a chance to try to draw the game with the move knight h4 protecting this pawn on f5. So I didn't do this because I saw that after bishop c6 it would remove the defender of my knight. However, what I didn't see is I could play knight g6, sacrificing the knight to get this perpetual. And I didn't see this. But this would have probably drawn the game if my opponent played bishop c6. And if my opponent doesn't play bishop c6, I'm still threatening to do this. You can't remove the knight because then I take this pawn. So my opponent basically has to sacrifice the rook, and he has to do this in order to try to continue the game. And when he takes with the knight, he can win this pawn, and it's still a game after maybe knight e4, king g7, knight c5. But at least the game goes on, and we can still play. However, this is probably going to be a draw, most likely. Okay, but I didn't see this. Very nice resource. Instead I played knight c3, attacking the rook. But unfortunately, now this pawn is very loose, and it's hard to defend it. So I play knight e4, trying to meet bishop f5 with knight g3, which is a fork. My opponent plays rook b1, and I play b4, basically just giving away the pawn, because I didn't really know how to defend it. I could have played knight e4, knight d4 to protect both, but I didn't do this. So after b4, bishop takes f5, knight c5, knight's on a pretty good square. Now I bring my king in, I have to bring my king in or else I just don't have chances. And now I'll see that I actually lost 2 pawns, which means I'm now down in exchange and a pawn. So not looking very good. However, we are still in a time scramble, my king's getting active. Anything can still happen here. I attack the pawn, we get check, king c6. My opponent decides to protect the pawn. My opponent doesn't want to trade pawns because he's up in an exchange. And in endgames, where pawns are few, you don't want to exchange pawns, because pawns are usually ultimately how you're going to win the game, by threatening to promote and your opponent has to sack pieces for the pawn. So my opponent doesn't want to trade pawns. I don't want to lose my pawn, so I play g3, bishop g4. Now I give a check, hoping for king g5, so I can play bishop g2. But my opponent doesn't fall for that, and plays king f7, of course. Bishop d2 attacking the knight, and then I do get a pawn. So I get 1 pawn back, now I'm only down in exchange, and if I can win this pawn and try to push this pawn, then I have good drawing chances. Okay, so knight c5, I would like to play king c5 to attack the knight, but that runs into a check. That's no good, so king b6. Bishop b2, knight g2. Now my knight gets out. Trying to activate my pieces. Rook g1, knight f4. Whoa. What's this? I won the game? What happened? So it turns out that my opponent lost on time. Well, how is that possible? You might be thinking, isn't there a 30-second increment? How do you lose on time? And that's a completely valid question. In fact, I'm still wondering how he lost on time myself. However, there is an explanation because I was at the game, I saw what happened. What happened was my opponent's time went down to 2 seconds, and he saw the clock and he panicked. And 2 seconds, oh no, how did that happen? Well, what was happening is, for the last like 10 or 15 moves, what we did was, we had a 30-second increment, right? So we get like 34 seconds, we let the time run down, think, 5 seconds, make a move, 35 seconds, think for 30 seconds, make a move, kind of like that. So we're basically kind of playing with fire in time trouble. And my opponent basically lets the fire get too big, or time gets too low, something like that. 2 seconds, oh no, gotta make a move. Now, online, you just play the move rook takes c3, rook takes g3, no big deal, right? But over the board, my opponent wanted to play this move, but when he panicked, but over the board, you have to pick up the pawn. Well, it depends on how you capture. But my opponent picked up the pawn, moved his hand to grab the rook, put the rook on the square, and then moved his hand to hit the clock. And unfortunately, that just took too long, and he lost on time. So I win the game. Now, was I happy to win the game? Of course. Did I deserve to win the game? Well, that's arguable. You can argue in the comments, whatever. But basically, a win is a win. I do get the win here, which is very nice. 200-point win. That gives me like a lot of rating points. Very nice. Very unfortunate for my opponent, who did actually end up withdrawing, so kind of sad. But a win is a win, and I will take the win, even though I would have liked to win in a more smooth way. But what do you want me to do? My opponent flagged. That's not my fault. Okay, so I'm 2 out of 3, and then we have 3 rounds to go, and I'll cover the next 3 rounds in the next video. Bye, everyone.